Question 1. The control framework reveals that Officer Miller has received a complaint from a resident regarding a parking citation issued on Elm Street in Buffalo, New York. The resident claims the citation was issued in error due to a temporary, clearly marked construction zone that obscured the permanent signage. Officer Miller's initial review of the citation and the resident's provided photographic evidence suggests a potential discrepancy in the enforcement of parking regulations. Which of the following actions should Officer Miller take? Option A. Dismiss the complaint outright, advising the resident that all citations are issued correctly and that further appeals are futile without direct evidence of a departmental error. Option B. Forward the complaint to a different department for handling, stating that parking citation disputes are outside the purview of the issuing officer's responsibilities. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of the citation details, the resident's photographic evidence, and relevant Buffalo parking ordinances, consulting with a supervisor for guidance on policy interpretation and potential resolution before making a final determination. Option D. Immediately uphold the citation as valid, informing the resident that parking regulations are strictly enforced and that their personal circumstances are not a factor in the citation's validity. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough review of the citation details, the resident's photographic evidence, and relevant Buffalo parking ordinances, consulting with a supervisor for guidance on policy interpretation and potential resolution before making a final determination. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation requiring careful judgment due to the inherent conflict between departmental policy and the potential for a citizen to be unfairly disadvantaged. The challenge lies in balancing the need for adherence to established procedures with the imperative to ensure fairness and prevent potential harm or injustice. A rigid application of policy without considering the nuances of a specific situation could lead to negative outcomes for the individual and erode public trust. The best approach involves a thorough, objective review of the situation, prioritizing the gathering of all relevant facts before making a decision. This includes consulting with supervisors and seeking clarification on policy application when ambiguity exists. This method is correct because it upholds the principles of due process and fairness, ensuring that decisions are based on evidence and sound judgment rather than assumptions or incomplete information. It aligns with the ethical obligation to serve the public impartially and to act in a manner that promotes justice and public confidence in the Buffalo Police Department. This approach also demonstrates a commitment to professional accountability by seeking guidance and ensuring decisions are well documented and defensible. An approach that immediately dismisses the citizen's concerns based solely on a preliminary understanding of policy is incorrect. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of extenuating circumstances or misinterpretations of the policy, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and a violation of the citizen's rights. It also demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the department's duty to investigate thoroughly. Another incorrect approach involves making a decision based on personal bias or assumptions about the citizen's intentions. This is ethically unsound and undermines the principle of equal treatment under the law. Such an approach can lead to discriminatory practices and damage the reputation of the department. Finally, an approach that involves delaying the decision indefinitely without any clear plan for resolution is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of initiative and a failure to address the citizen's concerns in a timely and effective manner, which can lead to frustration and further escalation of the issue. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with active listening and information gathering. They should then analyze the gathered facts against departmental policies and relevant legal statutes. When faced with ambiguity or potential conflicts, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel is crucial. The final decision should be well-reasoned, documented, and communicated clearly, ensuring it is both procedurally sound and ethically justifiable. Question 2. Analysis of a situation where a Buffalo Police Department officer encounters an agitated individual blocking a public sidewalk and shouting grievances. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to ensure public safety and uphold individual rights? Option A. Engage the individual in a confrontational manner, questioning the validity of their grievances loudly. Option B. Ignore the individual and continue with the officer's original patrol route, assuming the situation will resolve on its own. Option C. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through calm verbal communication. Assess the immediate threat and inquire about the individual's concerns. Option D. Immediately issue a dispersal order and prepare to use physical force if the individual does not comply. The correct answer is C. Attempt to de-escalate the situation through calm verbal communication. Assess the immediate threat and inquire about the individual's concerns. Explanation. Analysis of the scenario reveals a professional challenge stemming from the inherent tension between maintaining public order and upholding individual rights during a potentially volatile situation. The Buffalo Police Department officer must exercise sound judgment, balancing the immediate need for safety with the legal and ethical obligations to treat all individuals with fairness and respect, even under pressure. The scenario requires a deep understanding of the New York State penal law and departmental policies regarding lawful use of force and de-escalation techniques. The correct approach involves prioritizing de-escalation and communication to resolve the situation peacefully, while simultaneously assessing the immediate threat to public safety. This approach is correct because it aligns with the New York State penal law's emphasis on using the minimum force necessary to achieve a lawful objective and departmental training that stresses de-escalation as a primary tactic. By attempting to verbally calm the individual and understand their grievance, the officer is acting to prevent unnecessary escalation and potential harm to both the individual and the public, thereby upholding the principle of proportionality in law enforcement actions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately resort to physical restraint or the threat of force without first attempting to de-escalate. This fails to meet the legal standard of using minimum force and violates departmental policy that mandates de-escalation efforts. Such an action could be deemed excessive force under New York state law and could lead to disciplinary action, civil liability, and damage to community relations. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the individual's distress and proceed with an unrelated task, assuming the situation will resolve itself. This demonstrates a failure to assess and address a potential public safety concern and neglects the duty of care owed to individuals within the community. It also fails to uphold the principle of responsiveness and proactive policing. A further incorrect approach would be to engage in argumentative or dismissive dialogue that further antagonizes the individual. This escalates the situation unnecessarily, increases the risk of physical confrontation, and is contrary to the principles of professional conduct and community policing, potentially violating departmental standards for respectful interaction. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rapid assessment of the threat level, followed by an attempt to de-escalate through verbal communication and active listening. If de-escalation is unsuccessful and a threat persists, officers must then consider the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat, always in accordance with New York State penal law and departmental policy. Documentation of all actions and observations is also a critical component of professional conduct. Question 3. The review process indicates that during a routine patrol in Buffalo, New York, an officer observes a vehicle swerving significantly within its lane and occasionally crossing the fog line. The driver appears to be looking down at something inside the vehicle. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the officer? Option A. Initiate a traffic stop to investigate the observed erratic driving and potential safety hazard. Option B. Immediately attempt to arrest the driver for suspected driving while intoxicated without further interaction. Option C. Continue patrolling and disregard the observed driving behavior as it does not definitively indicate impairment. Option D. Initiate a high-speed pursuit to apprehend the driver due to the erratic driving. Correct answer is A. Initiate a traffic stop to investigate the observed erratic driving and potential safety hazard. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential breach of departmental policy and public trust. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for thorough investigation with the protection of individual rights and departmental integrity. Officers are entrusted with significant authority, and their actions must be demonstrably lawful and ethical to maintain public confidence. The core of the challenge lies in discerning the appropriate level of intervention based on observable facts and established procedures, rather than assumptions or personal biases. The correct approach involves a measured and evidence-based response. Specifically, when an officer observes erratic driving that poses a clear and immediate danger to the public, the most appropriate action is to initiate a traffic stop to investigate the observed behavior. This aligns with the New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law, which permits stops for observed violations or reasonable suspicion of impairment. The purpose of the stop is to gather more information, assess the driver's condition, and determine if further action, such as an arrest or citation, is warranted. This approach prioritizes public safety while adhering to legal standards for initiating police encounters. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume the driver is under the influence and proceed with an arrest without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of other explanations for the erratic driving, such as a medical emergency or a mechanical issue, and bypasses the necessary steps to establish probable cause for an arrest. Such an action could lead to a wrongful arrest, violating the driver's rights and exposing the department to legal liability. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the erratic driving due to a lack of immediate, definitive proof of impairment. While officers must have reasonable suspicion to initiate a stop, ignoring behavior that clearly endangers others is a dereliction of duty. New York state law and departmental policy mandate officers to address observed traffic violations and unsafe driving practices to ensure public safety. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to engage in a high-speed pursuit without a clear and present danger to the public or a serious offense being committed. While the erratic driving is concerning, initiating a pursuit without assessing the severity of the risk and considering departmental pursuit policies could escalate the situation unnecessarily and put both the public and the officers at undue risk. A professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a rapid assessment of the observed behavior against established legal standards and departmental policies. Officers must ask, is there reasonable suspicion to believe a violation has occurred or is occurring? Does the behavior pose an immediate threat to public safety? What are the departmental guidelines for traffic stops, investigations, and pursuits? The goal is to de-escalate when possible, gather facts, and act within legal and ethical boundaries to ensure both public safety and individual rights are protected. Question 4. Performance analysis shows that officers at the Buffalo Police Department are frequently approached by media outlets seeking information on active investigations. During a recent incident, a patrol officer on scene was directly questioned by a reporter about the identity of individuals present and the specific nature of the ongoing investigation. Considering the regulations governing the Buffalo Police Department and New York state law, what is the most appropriate course of action for the patrol officer? Option A. Immediately provide the reporter with the names and addresses of all individuals present at the scene and a preliminary description of the alleged criminal activity. Option B. State that no comment can be made and refuse to engage with the media in any capacity. Option C. Consult Buffalo Police Department general orders and relevant New York state laws to determine what information can be lawfully and appropriately released, and if necessary, direct the media to the public information officer. Option D. Share any details that seem relevant to the public interest, even if they have not been officially verified or authorized for release. The correct answer is C. Consult Buffalo Police Department general orders and relevant New York state laws to determine what information can be lawfully and appropriately released, and if necessary, direct the media to the public information officer. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a potential conflict between departmental policy, the need for timely information dissemination, and the privacy rights of individuals involved in an ongoing investigation. Officers are expected to uphold the law and departmental regulations while also contributing to public safety and transparency. The pressure to provide information quickly can lead to hasty decisions that may have unintended consequences. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves carefully reviewing the Buffalo Police Department's general orders and New York state laws regarding the release of information pertaining to active investigations. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to established legal and departmental frameworks. Specifically, Buffalo Police Department General Order 3.15 Public Information and Media Relations outlines procedures for releasing information, emphasizing accuracy, timeliness, and the protection of investigative integrity and individual privacy. New York State's Public Officers Law, particularly Article 6, Freedom of Information Law, also governs access to public records, but includes exemptions for information that would interfere with law enforcement investigations or disclose confidential sources. By consulting these specific regulations, an officer ensures that any information shared is done so in a manner that is both legally compliant and ethically sound, preventing premature disclosure that could jeopardize the investigation or violate privacy rights. Incorrect approaches analysis. Sharing preliminary details immediately without verification or authorization from the public information officer is professionally unacceptable. This fails to comply with departmental policy that designates specific individuals or units responsible for media interaction and information release. It risks disseminating inaccurate information, compromising the investigation by alerting potential suspects, and violating the privacy of individuals not yet charged or convicted. Releasing the names and addresses of all individuals present at the scene, regardless of their involvement status, is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes an overreach of information sharing and a potential violation of privacy rights. Unless legally mandated or directly relevant to the immediate public safety concern, such detailed personal information should not be disclosed, as it can lead to unwarranted public scrutiny and potential harm to innocent parties. Providing a general statement that an investigation is underway without offering any specific details, even when pressed by the media, is a missed opportunity for responsible public communication. While caution is necessary, a complete lack of engagement can foster speculation and distrust. A more appropriate response, guided by policy, would be to acknowledge the incident and state that an investigation is ongoing, with further details to be released as appropriate and permissible by law, potentially directing media inquiries to the public information officer. Professional reasoning. Professionals in law enforcement must adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying the governing policies and legal statutes. In situations involving public information, this means immediately referencing departmental general orders and relevant state laws. The next step is to assess the nature of the information requested and its potential impact on the investigation, public safety, and individual rights. If there is any ambiguity, or if the request falls outside standard procedures, the professional should consult with supervisors or designated public information officers. The ultimate goal is to balance the public's right to know with the imperative to conduct thorough and fair investigations and protect individual privacy. Question 5. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a moderate impact incident involving a citizen complaint about excessive force during an arrest in Buffalo, New York. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Buffalo Police Department supervisor receiving this information? Option A. Advise the involved officer, S, to prepare a statement and await further instructions before commencing any investigation. Option B. Initiate a formal internal investigation into the alleged excessive force complaint, ensuring all procedural steps are followed. Option C. Defer the investigation until a pattern of similar complaints emerges to justify a broader review. Option D. Classify the complaint as low priority and monitor the situation without immediate formal action, given the moderate risk assessment. Correct answer is B. Initiate a formal internal investigation into the alleged excessive force complaint, ensuring all procedural steps are followed. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a moderate impact incident involving a citizen complaint about excessive force during an arrest in Buffalo, New York. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for thorough investigation with the preservation of departmental integrity and public trust. Officers are expected to act within the bounds of the law and departmental policy, and citizen complaints, even those deemed moderate in risk, necessitate a careful and impartial response. The best approach involves initiating a formal internal investigation immediately upon receipt of the complaint. This approach is correct because it aligns with the Buffalo Police Department's established procedures for handling citizen complaints, which mandate prompt and thorough investigation of all allegations. Specifically, New York state law and departmental policy require that all complaints of misconduct be documented and investigated to ensure accountability and identify any patterns of behavior that may require corrective action or training. This process upholds the department's commitment to transparency and due process for both the complainant and the officer, S, involved. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the complaint without a formal investigation, citing the moderate risk assessment. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for investigating all complaints and erodes public trust by suggesting that allegations are not taken seriously. Another incorrect approach is to delay the investigation until other departmental priorities are addressed. This violates the principle of timely investigation and can lead to the loss of crucial evidence or witness memory, compromising the integrity of the investigation. Finally, an incorrect approach is to conduct an informal inquiry solely among the involved officers without interviewing the complainant or independent witnesses. This lacks impartiality, fails to gather all necessary evidence, and does not adhere to due process standards, potentially leading to an unfair outcome and further damaging the department's reputation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and legal mandates. This involves recognizing the inherent obligation to investigate all complaints, regardless of initial risk assessment, and to do so in a timely, impartial, and thorough manner. The process should involve clear documentation, objective evidence gathering, and fair consideration of all perspectives, ensuring that departmental actions are consistent with the law and ethical standards. Question 6. Investigation of a citizen's complaint alleging excessive force by a Buffalo Police Department officer requires a structured and legally compliant response. Which of the following approaches best represents professional best practice in initiating and conducting such an investigation? Option A. Rely primarily on the accuser's detailed written statement and proceed with recommending disciplinary action if the statement appears credible, without interviewing the officer or other potential witnesses. Option B. Conduct a brief, informal conversation with the accused officer to gauge their perspective on the allegations before deciding whether to proceed with a formal investigation. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal internal affairs investigation. Secure all relevant evidence including body-worn camera footage and witness statements, and meticulously document every step of the process in accordance with Buffalo Police Department policy and New York state law. Option D. Immediately recommend suspension of the officer pending a full investigation, based on the seriousness of the excessive force allegation as reported by the citizen. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal internal affairs investigation. Secure all relevant evidence including body-worn camera footage and witness statements, and meticulously document every step of the process in accordance with Buffalo Police Department policy and New York state law. Explanation. Investigation of a potential internal affairs complaint against a Buffalo Police Department officer presents a professionally challenging scenario due to the inherent conflict between maintaining public trust, ensuring officer accountability, and protecting the rights of the accused officer. The need for a thorough, impartial, and legally sound investigation is paramount. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests and uphold the integrity of the department. The best professional practice involves a systematic and documented approach that prioritizes evidence gathering and adherence to established departmental policies and New York state law. This approach ensures that all relevant facts are collected, analyzed, and presented in a manner that supports a fair and just outcome. It involves initiating a formal investigation, securing all pertinent evidence, conducting interviews with all involved parties and witnesses, and meticulously documenting every step of the process. This method is correct because it aligns with principles of due process, departmental regulations governing internal investigations, and the legal standards for evidence collection and preservation in New York. It provides a clear and defensible record of the investigation. An approach that involves informally discussing the allegations with the accused officer without initiating a formal investigation is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses established procedures, fails to create a proper record, and may compromise the integrity of any subsequent investigation by allowing evidence to be potentially altered or lost. It also violates departmental policy regarding the formal reporting and investigation of misconduct allegations. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to rely solely on the accuser's statement without seeking corroborating evidence or interviewing other potential witnesses. This is insufficient for a thorough investigation and risks making a determination based on incomplete or biased information. It fails to meet the standard of a comprehensive inquiry required by departmental policy and ethical policing standards. Finally, an approach that involves immediately recommending disciplinary action based on initial allegations without a full investigation is premature and unethical. This violates the principle of innocent until proven guilty and undermines the due process rights of the officer. It also fails to adhere to departmental procedures that mandate a complete investigation before any disciplinary measures are considered. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of departmental policy and relevant state laws governing internal investigations. This framework emphasizes impartiality, thoroughness, and documentation at every stage. It requires a commitment to gathering all available evidence, interviewing all relevant parties, and maintaining an objective stance throughout the investigative process. Question 7. Comparative studies suggest that in situations involving potential evidence discovery during an investigation in Buffalo, New York, officers must navigate strict procedural guidelines. Officer Miller, while investigating a reported disturbance, observes what appears to be a discarded weapon near a public park entrance. Considering the legal and departmental framework in New York State, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Officer Miller? Option A. Officer Miller immediately secures the scene to preserve potential evidence and promptly notifies his supervisor and the Buffalo District Attorney's Office of the discovery. Option B. Officer Miller retrieves the potential weapon himself to secure it and then proceeds to interview witnesses at the scene. Option C. Officer Miller makes a mental note of the weapon's location and continues with his initial investigation of the disturbance, planning to report it later. Option D. Officer Miller discusses the discovery of the potential weapon with the individuals present at the disturbance before contacting his supervisor. The correct answer is A. Officer Miller immediately secures the scene to preserve potential evidence and promptly notifies his supervisor and the Buffalo District Attorney's Office of the discovery. Explanation. Comparative studies suggest that effective law enforcement requires a nuanced understanding of departmental policies and the legal framework governing police conduct in New York State. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Officer Miller must balance the immediate need to gather information with the strict procedural requirements designed to protect individual rights and ensure the integrity of evidence. Failure to adhere to these protocols can lead to the suppression of evidence, disciplinary action, and damage to public trust. The best professional practice involves Officer Miller immediately notifying his supervisor and the district attorney's office of the potential evidence discovery. This approach is correct because it adheres to the New York State Police Internal Affairs Guidelines and the Criminal Procedure Law, which mandate prompt reporting of significant evidence to appropriate authorities. This ensures that the evidence is handled according to established legal procedures, that chain of custody is maintained, and that prosecutorial discretion is exercised appropriately. It also allows for specialized units to be involved if necessary, ensuring the evidence is processed by trained personnel. An incorrect approach would be for Officer Miller to attempt to secure the evidence himself without proper authorization or documentation, potentially compromising its integrity or violating search and seizure laws as interpreted under New York State's constitutional protections. Another incorrect approach would be to delay reporting the discovery to his supervisor, which could be seen as an attempt to circumvent established protocols and could lead to the evidence being overlooked or mishandled. Finally, an approach where Officer Miller discusses the potential evidence with the involved parties before reporting it to his superiors would be professionally unacceptable, as it could lead to tampering, witness intimidation, or the creation of a false narrative, violating ethical standards and departmental regulations in New York. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to established policy and legal mandates. This involves a clear understanding of reporting structures, evidence handling protocols, and the rights of individuals involved. When faced with a discovery, the immediate step should be to secure the scene if necessary, document observations, and then report to the designated supervisor and relevant legal authorities without delay, allowing the proper channels to manage the subsequent steps. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that Officer Miller, a member of the Buffalo Police Department, has recently learned that a close personal friend is a person of interest in an ongoing internal affairs investigation. Officer Miller has had no prior knowledge of this investigation. What is the most appropriate course of action for Officer Miller to take to uphold the integrity of the Buffalo Police Department and ensure a fair investigative process? Option A. Discuss the investigation with their friend to understand their perspective and potential involvement. Option B. Immediately report the personal relationship and the potential conflict of interest to their direct supervisor. Option C. Continue to participate in the investigation, relying on their professional judgment to remain impartial. Option D. Discreetly attempt to gather information about the investigation to assess the severity of the situation, without formal disclosure. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the personal relationship and the potential conflict of interest to their direct supervisor. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a situation where a police officer, Officer Miller, is faced with a potential conflict of interest due to a personal relationship with an individual involved in an ongoing investigation within the Buffalo Police Department's jurisdiction. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the officer to navigate the delicate balance between their professional duties and personal connections, ensuring that impartiality and public trust are maintained. The integrity of the investigation and the reputation of the Buffalo Police Department are at stake. The best professional practice in this situation involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to a superior officer. This approach is correct because it adheres to fundamental principles of law enforcement ethics and departmental regulations, which prioritize avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. By disclosing the relationship, Officer Miller allows for appropriate measures to be taken, such as reassigning the investigation to another officer, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the process and preventing any potential bias, conscious or unconscious. This aligns with the general expectation in law enforcement that officers must act impartially and avoid situations that could compromise their objectivity, as mandated by departmental policies and the broader ethical code governing police conduct in New York State. An incorrect approach would be to continue involvement in the investigation without disclosure, hoping personal feelings do not influence professional judgment. This is ethically unsound and a violation of departmental policy because it creates a direct conflict of interest and undermines the impartiality required of law enforcement officers. It exposes the investigation to scrutiny and potential challenge, eroding public confidence. Another incorrect approach is to subtly steer the investigation away from the individual due to the personal relationship, without formal disclosure. This is a serious ethical breach and a violation of duty. It constitutes a form of obstruction or bias, even if not overtly malicious, and is unacceptable under the principles of fair and impartial policing. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to discuss the details of the investigation with the individual involved, even with the intention of gathering information. This is a severe breach of confidentiality and professional conduct, potentially compromising the investigation and violating departmental rules regarding the disclosure of sensitive information. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a proactive and transparent approach. Officers should be trained to recognize potential conflicts of interest, understand their reporting obligations, and prioritize the integrity of their duties above personal relationships. When a potential conflict arises, the immediate step should be to report it to a supervisor, allowing for an objective assessment and appropriate action to maintain impartiality and public trust. Question 9. Following a credible tip regarding ongoing illegal activity within a private residence in Buffalo, New York, and observing suspicious behavior from the occupant that suggests potential evidence destruction, what is the most appropriate course of action for a Buffalo Police Department officer to take to gather evidence while respecting constitutional rights? Option A. Secure the perimeter of the residence to prevent the removal or destruction of evidence, and then immediately seek a search warrant from a judge based on the tip and observed behavior, ensuring all actions are documented. Option B. Enter the residence without a warrant to conduct a search, believing that the observed suspicious behavior constitutes exigent circumstances justifying immediate action to preserve evidence. Option C. Wait for further instructions from a supervisor without taking any immediate action to secure the scene, even if there is a clear risk of evidence destruction. Option D. Confront the occupant and demand immediate consent to search the residence, implying that refusal will lead to more severe consequences. The correct answer is A. Secure the perimeter of the residence to prevent the removal or destruction of evidence, and then immediately seek a search warrant from a judge based on the tip and observed behavior, ensuring all actions are documented. Explanation. The scenario presented is professionally challenging because it requires an officer to balance the immediate need for information with the established legal and ethical protocols for evidence handling and citizen rights. The potential for a perceived or actual violation of rights, coupled with the imperative to gather information for an ongoing investigation, necessitates a careful and legally sound approach. The Buffalo Police Department operates under New York state law and federal constitutional principles, which dictate specific procedures for searches, seizures, and interrogations. The best professional practice involves a methodical approach that prioritizes legal compliance and the preservation of evidence integrity. This approach involves securing the scene, identifying potential evidence without disturbing it, and then seeking the appropriate legal authorization, such as a warrant, if a search beyond plain view or immediate consent is required. This ensures that any evidence obtained is admissible in court and that the rights of individuals are respected. Specifically, under New York law and Fourth Amendment principles, a warrantless search of a private residence is generally presumed unreasonable, requiring specific exceptions to apply. Obtaining a warrant based on probable cause, supported by sworn testimony, is the most robust method to overcome this presumption. An incorrect approach would be to immediately search the residence without consent or a warrant, even with the belief that evidence might be destroyed. This directly violates Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, as interpreted by New York courts. The potential destruction of evidence, while a concern, does not automatically grant an exception to the warrant requirement unless exigent circumstances are demonstrably present and narrowly defined by law. Another incorrect approach is to delay the investigation significantly by solely focusing on obtaining a warrant without first taking reasonable steps to secure the scene. While a warrant is crucial for a search, officers have a duty to prevent the imminent destruction of evidence. This can often be achieved through less intrusive means, such as maintaining a perimeter until legal authorization is obtained. Failing to do so could lead to the loss of critical information. Finally, an approach that involves coercing consent from the resident is ethically and legally unacceptable. Consent must be voluntary and informed. The indication of duress or misrepresentation invalidates consent and renders any subsequent search and seizure unlawful, potentially leading to the suppression of evidence and disciplinary action. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a rapid assessment of the immediate threat to evidence or public safety, followed by a consultation with supervisors or legal counsel if time and circumstances permit. Officers must be thoroughly trained in the nuances of probable cause, exigent circumstances, and the warrant process as defined by New York state statutes and relevant case law. Prioritizing legal adherence while effectively investigating is paramount. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the Buffalo Police Department's overtime expenditure exceeding its allocated budget by 15% in the last fiscal quarter. If the allocated overtime budget for that quarter was $500,000 and the actual expenditure was $575,000, calculate the percentage by which the actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget and determine the minimum additional justification required by New York State municipal finance law for such an overage. Option A. The actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget by 15%. The minimum additional justification required involves a detailed report linking the overtime to specific documented emergent public safety incidents or unavoidable operational demands approved by the police commissioner. Option B. The actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget by 13.04%. The minimum additional justification required involves a detailed report linking the overtime to specific, documented emergent public safety incidents or unavoidable operational demands, approved by the police commissioner. Option C. The actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget by 13.04%. The minimum additional justification required involves a brief verbal explanation to the chief of police regarding general staffing shortages. Option D. The actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget by 15%. The minimum additional justification required involves a brief verbal explanation to the chief of police regarding general staffing shortages. The correct answer is A. The actual expenditure exceeded the allocated budget by 15%. The minimum additional justification required involves a detailed report linking the overtime to specific, documented emergent public safety incidents or unavoidable operational demands, approved by the police commissioner. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in public service where resource allocation must be balanced against operational needs and budgetary constraints. The Buffalo Police Department, like any municipal agency, operates under strict financial regulations and performance metrics. The challenge lies in accurately forecasting overtime costs, which can fluctuate significantly due to unforeseen events, and ensuring that these costs remain within allocated budgets without compromising public safety or officer morale. The need for precise calculation and justification for any deviations from the budget is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and data-driven approach to overtime management. This includes meticulously tracking historical overtime data, identifying patterns and contributing factors, e.g., specific events, staffing shortages, and using this information to develop a more accurate predictive model for future overtime needs. When actual overtime exceeds projections, the correct approach requires a detailed, documented justification that links the expenditure directly to specific, unavoidable operational demands or emergent public safety incidents, referencing relevant departmental policies on overtime authorization and expenditure. This aligns with principles of fiscal responsibility and accountability mandated by municipal budgeting laws in New York State, which require clear justification for all public funds expended. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply absorb the excess overtime costs without detailed justification, assuming that public safety needs will always supersede budgetary concerns. This fails to adhere to the fiscal accountability required by New York State municipal finance law, which necessitates proper authorization and documentation for all expenditures. It also sets a dangerous precedent, potentially leading to unchecked budget overruns in the future and undermining the integrity of the budgeting process. Another incorrect approach is to arbitrarily cut back on necessary overtime during periods of high demand, even if it means reducing police presence or response times. While adherence to budget is important, public safety is the primary mandate of the police department. Failing to adequately staff for emergent situations, even if overtime is required, could lead to a breach of duty and expose the department to liability, violating the core ethical obligation to protect and serve the citizens of Buffalo. A third incorrect approach is to reallocate funds from other essential operational areas, e.g., equipment maintenance, training, to cover overtime without a clear, documented rationale tied to immediate public safety needs. This demonstrates poor financial planning and can negatively impact the department's long-term operational effectiveness and safety. Such reallocation would likely violate departmental financial policies and state auditing requirements, which mandate that funds be used for their designated purposes unless formally reappropriated with proper authorization. Professional reasoning. Professionals in public service must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data analysis, adherence to regulatory frameworks, and ethical considerations. This involves 1. Understanding the operational context and potential variables affecting resource needs. 2. Utilizing historical data and predictive modeling for accurate forecasting. 3. Maintaining meticulous records and documentation for all expenditures, especially those exceeding budget. 4. Justifying any deviations from budget with clear, evidence-based reasoning tied to public safety or unavoidable operational necessities. 5. Consulting relevant departmental policies and state/local financial regulations to ensure compliance. 6. Communicating transparently with superiors and oversight bodies regarding resource allocation and expenditure. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that Buffalo Police Department officers are often faced with situations requiring rapid assessment of potential criminal activity. Considering New York State law and the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for an officer who observes an individual exhibiting highly nervous behavior and attempting to conceal an object in their waistband in a known drug trafficking area without any direct observation of a drug transaction? Option A. Immediately detain the individual and conduct a full search of their person and any nearby containers for evidence of a crime. Option B. Conduct a pat-down search of the individual for weapons, and if no weapon is found, ask the individual to voluntarily reveal the concealed object. Option C. Rely on the individual's nervous behavior and the location to establish probable cause for a warrantless search, assuming the object is contraband. Option D. Approach the individual, ask them what they are concealing, and if they refuse to answer or appear more agitated, attempt to physically retrieve the concealed object. The correct answer is B. Conduct a pat-down search of the individual for weapons, and if no weapon is found, ask the individual to voluntarily reveal the concealed object. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for law enforcement officers in Buffalo, New York, balancing the need for timely information gathering with the constitutional rights of individuals. The Buffalo Police Department operates under the framework of New York state law and the United States Constitution, particularly the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. The core of the challenge lies in determining when an individual's expectation of privacy is diminished to the point where a warrantless search is permissible, or when probable cause and exigent circumstances justify immediate action without a warrant. The best professional practice in this situation involves a thorough, on-the-spot assessment of the totality of the circumstances, focusing on objective facts that would lead a reasonable officer to believe that evidence of a crime is present and that its imminent destruction or removal is likely. This approach prioritizes adherence to established legal standards for warrantless searches, such as the plain view doctrine, consent, or exigent circumstances, while meticulously documenting the specific articulable facts supporting the officer's actions. This aligns with the legal requirement in New York and under federal law that warrantless searches be, per se, unreasonable, unless they fall within a recognized exception, and that officers must be able to articulate specific, objective reasons for their belief. An incorrect approach would be to rely on mere hunches, generalized suspicions, or the subjective belief that the individual might be involved in criminal activity. This fails to meet the constitutional standard of probable cause, which requires more than a mere possibility. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a search based solely on the individual's nervous demeanor or their presence in a high-crime area, as these factors alone are insufficient to establish probable cause or justify a warrantless search under New York law. Finally, attempting to justify a search based on a later discovery of evidence without having had probable cause at the time of the search is a post hoc rationalization that violates constitutional protections. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes the objective assessment of facts, the application of established legal exceptions to the warrant requirement, and the importance of contemporaneous documentation. When faced with a situation where immediate action seems necessary, officers must ask themselves, what specific, observable facts lead me to believe that a crime has occurred or is occurring, and that evidence is in danger of being lost or destroyed? If the answer cannot be articulated with objective certainty, the prudent course is to seek a warrant or to gather further information to establish probable cause. Question 12. Consider a scenario where a Buffalo Police Department officer observes a close personal friend, whom they have known for many years, committing a minor traffic violation while on duty. The officer knows this friend is generally a responsible individual, but is currently experiencing personal difficulties. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the officer? Option A. Privately approach the friend, issue a verbal warning and advise them to be more careful in the future, without creating any official record. Option B. Use the knowledge of the infraction to subtly influence the friend in future personal interactions, ensuring they are aware of the officer's discretion. Option C. Overlook the infraction due to the personal relationship and the friend's current difficulties, assuming it's a one-time lapse. Option D. Report the observed infraction to their immediate supervisor or the appropriate internal affairs division for objective handling. The correct answer is D. Report the observed infraction to their immediate supervisor or the appropriate internal affairs division for objective handling. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between personal relationships and the impartial application of law enforcement duties. Maintaining public trust and ensuring fairness are paramount for the Buffalo Police Department. The officer's judgment is tested by the potential for bias, either conscious or unconscious, to influence their actions. The best approach involves prioritizing departmental policy and ethical conduct over personal familiarity. This means reporting the observed infraction to the appropriate supervisor or internal affairs division, allowing for an objective investigation and disciplinary process. This aligns with the core principles of law enforcement integrity, which demand impartiality and accountability. Specifically, the Buffalo Police Department's Code of Conduct, which emphasizes treating all individuals equally under the law and avoiding conflicts of interest, mandates such reporting. This ensures that the law is applied consistently, regardless of personal connections, and upholds the department's commitment to justice for all citizens of Buffalo. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the infraction due to the personal relationship. This failure to act violates the duty to enforce the law and uphold departmental standards. It creates an appearance of favoritism, eroding public trust and potentially leading to accusations of corruption or dereliction of duty. Such inaction also fails to address a potential pattern of behavior by the individual, which could have broader public safety implications. Another incorrect approach is to confront the individual privately and issue a warning without documentation. While seemingly a compromise, this still circumvents the established disciplinary procedures and lacks transparency. It does not create a record of the incident, which could be crucial for future accountability if the individual reoffends. Furthermore, it places the officer in a position of informal enforcement, which can be subjective and open to misinterpretation, undermining the formal disciplinary structure of the Buffalo Police Department. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to use the infraction as leverage for personal gain or to exert influence over the individual. This is a severe ethical breach and a violation of criminal law, constituting abuse of power and potentially bribery or extortion. It directly contradicts the oath of office and the fundamental duty to serve and protect the public impartially. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical obligations and departmental regulations. This involves a clear understanding of the code of conduct, recognizing potential conflicts of interest, and committing to transparent and accountable actions. When faced with a situation where personal relationships intersect with professional duties, the default should always be to follow established procedures for reporting and investigation, ensuring that fairness and integrity are maintained. Question 13. Upon reviewing departmental procedures for the Buffalo Police Department, an officer witnesses a fellow officer, whom they consider a friend, engaging in behavior that appears to be a violation of departmental policy regarding the handling of seized property in Buffalo, New York. The officer is aware that failure to report such violations can have serious consequences for both the department and the public. What is the most appropriate course of action for the officer to take? Option A. Report the observed behavior to their immediate supervisor or the Internal Affairs Division, following the established departmental protocol for reporting misconduct. Option B. Ignore the observed behavior to avoid jeopardizing the friendship and potential workplace conflict. Option C. Confront the colleague privately to discuss the observed behavior and encourage them to correct it. Option D. Discuss the observed behavior with other trusted colleagues to gauge their opinions before deciding on a course of action. The correct answer is A. Report the observed behavior to their immediate supervisor or the Internal Affairs Division, following the established departmental protocol for reporting misconduct. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Buffalo Police Department officer due to the inherent conflict between personal relationships and the duty to uphold departmental regulations and public trust. The officer's knowledge of a potential violation by a colleague, coupled with a personal friendship, creates a complex ethical dilemma requiring careful judgment to balance loyalty with integrity. The best professional approach involves reporting the observed behavior through the established departmental channels. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the New York State penal law and Buffalo Police Department's internal affairs policies, which mandate reporting of suspected misconduct. Upholding these regulations is paramount to maintaining the integrity of the police force and ensuring public confidence. By following the proper reporting procedure, the officer acts as a responsible member of the department, contributing to a culture of accountability and ethical conduct. This aligns with the core principles of public service, emphasizing that no officer is above the law or departmental rules. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior due to the personal friendship. This failure to report constitutes a dereliction of duty and a violation of departmental policy. It undermines the principle of equal application of the law and can be interpreted as complicity in the misconduct, eroding public trust and potentially leading to further violations. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the colleague directly and privately without reporting the incident. While seemingly an attempt to resolve the issue amicably, this bypasses the official investigative process. It places the officer in a position of judgment without proper authority and fails to ensure that the alleged violation is investigated thoroughly and impartially by the appropriate internal affairs unit, as required by departmental procedures. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to discuss the observed behavior with other officers outside of the official reporting structure. This constitutes gossip and can create a hostile work environment, potentially damaging reputations without due process. It also risks compromising any future investigation by prematurely disseminating information or influencing potential witnesses. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to legal and departmental regulations. This involves recognizing potential ethical conflicts, understanding the established reporting mechanisms for misconduct, and acting with integrity and impartiality, even when personal relationships are involved. The framework should emphasize the duty to report, the importance of due process, and the commitment to maintaining public trust. Question 14. When evaluating a traffic stop in Buffalo, New York, where the driver is a close personal friend, what is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the Buffalo police officer? Option A. Immediately report the personal relationship to a supervisor and request to be recused from any further involvement in the stop or any subsequent investigation. Option B. Ignore the traffic violation and allow the friend to continue driving without any enforcement action. Option C. Proceed with the traffic stop and issue a citation as normal, but privately offer the friend advice on how to contest the ticket later. Option D. Issue a warning for the traffic violation and refrain from issuing a citation, as the personal relationship warrants leniency. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the personal relationship to a supervisor and request to be recused from any further involvement in the stop or any subsequent investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it pits a sworn duty to uphold the law and maintain public trust against a personal relationship and the potential for perceived favoritism or compromise of justice. The Buffalo Police Department operates under New York state laws and departmental regulations, which mandate impartiality and ethical conduct. A police officer's actions are scrutinized not only for legal compliance, but also for adherence to the ethical standards expected of law enforcement professionals. The core of the challenge lies in navigating the conflict between personal loyalty and professional obligation, where any deviation from strict impartiality can erode public confidence and potentially lead to legal or disciplinary repercussions. The best approach involves a clear and immediate declaration of the personal relationship to a supervisor and recusal from any involvement in the investigation or enforcement action. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the conflict of interest by removing the officer from a position where their judgment could be compromised. New York state law and police ethics codes emphasize the importance of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. By reporting the relationship and stepping aside, the officer demonstrates integrity, upholds the principle of equal application of the law, and protects the integrity of the investigation. This action aligns with the duty to serve the public impartially and maintain public trust, which are foundational to law enforcement. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the traffic stop and issue a warning without reporting the relationship. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a significant conflict of interest. The officer's personal connection could unconsciously influence their decision-making, leading to leniency that is not warranted by the circumstances of the stop. This failure to disclose and recuse violates ethical standards and potentially departmental policy, as it allows personal bias to interfere with professional duties, undermining the principle of equal justice. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the traffic violation entirely due to the personal relationship. This is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes dereliction of duty and favoritism. Police officers have a legal and ethical obligation to enforce traffic laws consistently, regardless of personal connections. Failing to act not only violates the law, but also erodes public trust by suggesting that certain individuals are above the law due to their relationships with officers. A third incorrect approach would be to issue a citation, but then discuss the incident with the individual later, offering advice on how to contest it. This is professionally unacceptable because it still involves a compromise of impartiality. While a citation is issued, the subsequent engagement blurs the lines between professional duty and personal relationship, potentially implying preferential treatment or an attempt to subvert the legal process. It demonstrates a failure to maintain the necessary professional distance and uphold the integrity of the enforcement action. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes transparency, impartiality, and adherence to legal and ethical guidelines. When a conflict of interest arises, the first step should always be to identify it clearly. The next step is to consult relevant policies and regulations. The paramount principle is to avoid any action that could be perceived as biased or that compromises the integrity of the law enforcement function. In situations involving personal relationships, immediate disclosure to a supervisor and recusal from involvement are the most effective ways to manage the conflict and maintain professional integrity. Question 15. The analysis reveals that Officer Miller, a member of the Buffalo Police Department, has learned through a confidential source that a close personal friend is the subject of an internal affairs investigation concerning alleged misconduct. Officer Miller is aware that the investigation is in its early stages and that the friend has not yet been formally notified. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for Officer Miller to take? Option A. Immediately report the information and the potential conflict of interest to his direct supervisor. Option B. Continue with his regular duties, assuming the investigation will proceed without his involvement. Option C. Attempt to gather more information about the investigation to assess its seriousness before deciding whether to report it. Option D. Discreetly contact his friend to provide a vague warning about potential scrutiny. Correct answer is A. Immediately report the information and the potential conflict of interest to his direct supervisor. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent conflict between a personal relationship and the duty to uphold departmental integrity and fairness in the Buffalo Police Department. The officer's knowledge of the impending investigation creates a significant ethical dilemma, requiring careful judgment to avoid compromising the investigation or appearing to show favoritism. The best professional practice involves immediately reporting the situation to a supervisor. This approach is correct because it adheres to the core ethical principles of transparency, accountability, and impartiality expected of law enforcement officers. By informing a supervisor, the officer ensures that the investigation proceeds without undue influence or the appearance of impropriety. This action aligns with the general duty of all Buffalo Police Department officers to report potential misconduct or conflicts of interest, as typically outlined in departmental policies and the New York State Public Officers Law concerning ethical conduct and conflicts of interest. It allows for proper management of the situation, potentially reassigning the investigation or implementing safeguards to maintain its integrity. Failing to report the situation to a supervisor is professionally unacceptable. This approach creates a direct conflict of interest and violates the duty of loyalty to the department and the public trust. It could be construed as obstruction of justice or aiding and abetting misconduct, depending on the officer's subsequent actions or inactions. Such a failure undermines the integrity of the investigation and the department's reputation. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to subtly warn the friend without formally reporting it. This is ethically flawed because it attempts to circumvent the reporting requirement while still engaging in a form of preferential treatment. It does not guarantee the investigation's integrity and still places the officer in a compromised position, potentially facing disciplinary action for failing to report a conflict of interest or for interfering with an investigation. Finally, ignoring the situation and hoping it resolves itself is also professionally unacceptable. This passive approach fails to address the ethical conflict and the potential for compromised investigation. It demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for departmental standards and the public's right to a fair and impartial investigation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to departmental policy, ethical codes, and legal obligations. When faced with a potential conflict of interest or information that could impact an investigation, the immediate and transparent reporting to a superior officer is the most prudent and ethically sound course of action. This ensures that the situation is handled by those with the authority and responsibility to maintain fairness and integrity. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that immediately utilizing a potentially crucial piece of evidence discovered during a high-priority investigation in Buffalo, New York, could significantly increase the chances of apprehending a suspect, but it would also mean bypassing the standard protocol for logging and securing such items. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the Buffalo police officer? Option A. Immediately use the evidence in the operation based on the perceived urgency and the potential for a successful apprehension, assuming formal documentation can be completed later. Option B. Disregard formal evidence handling procedures for this item, deeming it less critical than other potential evidence due to the immediate operational context. Option C. Proceed with using the evidence based on a verbal directive from a supervisor who acknowledges the urgency but bypasses formal logging procedures. Option D. Secure and log the evidence according to Buffalo Police Department General Orders and New York State Criminal Procedure Law, even if it causes a slight delay in its immediate use in the operation. The correct answer is D. Secure and log the evidence according to Buffalo Police Department General Orders and New York State Criminal Procedure Law, even if it causes a slight delay in its immediate use in the operation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it pits a perceived immediate benefit, resource acquisition for a critical operation, against established ethical principles and departmental regulations concerning evidence handling and integrity. The pressure to act quickly in a high-stakes situation can cloud judgment, making it crucial for officers to adhere to strict protocols even when expediency seems tempting. The best professional approach involves meticulously documenting the discovery of the evidence and securing it according to established procedures, even if it means a slight delay in its immediate use. This upholds the integrity of the investigation by ensuring the chain of custody is maintained from the outset. Specifically, in Buffalo, New York, officers are bound by the New York State Criminal Procedure Law and the Buffalo Police Department's internal general orders regarding evidence collection, preservation, and reporting. These regulations are designed to prevent tampering, contamination, and unauthorized access, thereby safeguarding the admissibility of evidence in court. Adhering to these protocols ensures that any evidence recovered is legally sound and ethically obtained, protecting both the investigation and the rights of individuals involved. An incorrect approach would be to bypass standard evidence logging and securing procedures to immediately use the discovered items in the ongoing operation. This failure to document and secure the evidence properly compromises its integrity. It violates the fundamental principles of chain of custody, which is a cornerstone of criminal investigations. Such an action could lead to the evidence being deemed inadmissible in court, jeopardizing the entire case. Furthermore, it disregards Buffalo Police Department general orders that mandate strict adherence to evidence handling protocols, potentially leading to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on a verbal agreement with a supervisor to bypass formal procedures, believing that the urgency of the situation justifies the deviation. While supervisors have authority, their directives must still align with established laws and departmental regulations. Circumventing documented procedures based on informal instructions erodes accountability and creates a dangerous precedent. It fails to create a clear, auditable record of the evidence's discovery and handling, which is essential for transparency and legal scrutiny. A final incorrect approach would be to assume the discovered items are not critical evidence and therefore do not require the same level of formal handling as other items. This is a dangerous assumption. Any item discovered during a criminal investigation that could potentially be used as proof of a crime or to link a suspect to a crime must be treated as critical evidence. The subjective assessment of an officer or supervisor regarding an item's importance does not negate the legal requirement for proper evidence management. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established legal and departmental protocols. This involves a clear understanding of evidence handling procedures, the importance of chain of custody, and the potential legal ramifications of deviations. When faced with time-sensitive situations, officers should consult their training and departmental guidelines, and if necessary, seek clarification from supervisors while still emphasizing the need to follow proper procedure. The principle of when in doubt, follow the rules is paramount. Question 17. Implementation of ethical guidelines within the Buffalo Police Department Civil Service Framework requires officers to navigate complex personal and professional interactions. If a Buffalo police officer becomes aware of a minor infraction committed by a close personal friend, what is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action? Option A. Immediately report the information to a supervisor, recusing oneself from any further involvement in the matter. Option B. Ignore the information to avoid personal or professional complications, assuming the infraction is minor. Option C. Discreetly advise the friend to rectify the situation to avoid official notice without reporting it. Option D. Intervene personally to address the infraction with the friend, offering a warning instead of formal reporting. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the information to a supervisor, recusing oneself from any further involvement in the matter. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between departmental policy, public trust, and the ethical obligation to uphold the law impartially. A police officer in Buffalo, New York, is faced with a situation where a close friend is involved in a minor infraction. The officer's personal relationship creates a significant ethical dilemma, as acting on this information could be perceived as favoritism or a dereliction of duty, while ignoring it could undermine public confidence in the integrity of the Buffalo Police Department. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising professional standards or personal integrity. The best professional approach involves immediate and transparent reporting of the situation to a supervisor. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of accountability and impartiality fundamental to law enforcement ethics and the regulations governing the Buffalo Police Department. By informing a supervisor, the officer removes themselves from the decision-making process regarding their friend, preventing any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. This action aligns with the ethical duty to uphold the law equally for all citizens and to maintain public trust, which is paramount for effective policing in Buffalo. It also ensures that the situation is handled by an unbiased party, following established departmental procedures. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and not report it. This failure constitutes a breach of the officer's duty to report potential violations and could be seen as condoning or enabling the infraction. It erodes public trust by suggesting that personal relationships can influence law enforcement actions, directly contravening the ethical imperative for impartiality. Another incorrect approach would be to directly intervene and handle the situation informally without reporting it. While seemingly an attempt to resolve the issue discreetly, this bypasses departmental protocols and creates an unacceptable risk of bias. It can lead to inconsistent application of the law and damage the department's reputation for fairness and transparency within the Buffalo community. A further incorrect approach would be to use the information to subtly influence the friend to rectify the situation without official involvement. This still involves the officer acting on information gained in their official capacity for personal reasons, creating a conflict of interest and potentially compromising the integrity of any subsequent official action if the friend does not comply. It also fails to uphold the principle of treating all individuals equally under the law. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of departmental policies, ethical codes, and the legal framework governing law enforcement in Buffalo, New York. When a conflict of interest arises, the primary decision-making steps should be: 1. Recognize the conflict of interest or potential for impropriety. 2. Immediately remove oneself from any direct involvement in the decision-making process. 3. Report the situation to the appropriate supervisory authority. 4. Cooperate fully with the supervisor's investigation and follow established procedures. This systematic approach ensures that actions are guided by professional ethics and departmental regulations, safeguarding both the officer's integrity and the public's trust. Question 18. To address the challenge of maintaining public trust and ensuring fair treatment within the Buffalo Police Department, an officer witnesses a fellow officer engaging in a minor but potentially policy-violating action, such as improperly handling evidence in a non-critical situation. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the witnessing officer? Option A. Document the observed behavior accurately and report it through the established internal affairs channels for investigation. Option B. Ignore the behavior, assuming it is a minor infraction and not wanting to cause trouble for a colleague. Option C. Discuss the incident with other officers in the break room to gauge their opinions before deciding on any action. Option D. Confront the officer directly and informally, suggesting they be more careful in the future, without any formal documentation. The correct answer is A. Document the observed behavior accurately and report it through the established internal affairs channels for investigation. Explanation. To address the challenge of maintaining public trust and ensuring fair treatment within the Buffalo Police Department, officers often face ethical dilemmas that require careful judgment. This scenario presents a situation where an officer witnesses a fellow officer engaging in a minor but potentially policy-violating action. The professional challenge lies in balancing loyalty to colleagues with the duty to uphold departmental regulations and public accountability. A failure to act appropriately can erode public confidence, create a perception of favoritism, and potentially embolden more serious misconduct. The best professional approach involves documenting the observed behavior accurately and reporting it through the established internal affairs channels. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of transparency, accountability, and the rule of law, which are fundamental to law enforcement ethics and the regulations governing the Buffalo Police Department. By following the proper reporting procedures, the officer upholds their oath to serve and protect, ensuring that all members of the department are held to the same standards. This process allows for a fair and impartial investigation into the incident, protecting both the integrity of the department and the rights of all involved. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the behavior, rationalizing it as a minor infraction or out of loyalty to a colleague. This failure to report violates departmental policy and ethical obligations, creating a blind spot in oversight and potentially allowing minor issues to escalate. It undermines the principle of equal application of rules and can foster a culture of impunity. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the officer directly and informally, without documentation or formal reporting. While seemingly an attempt at collegial resolution, this bypasses the established disciplinary and investigative procedures. It lacks the necessary documentation for a formal review, can lead to disputes, and does not guarantee that the behavior will be addressed systemically or that accountability will be ensured. This approach risks personalizing the issue rather than addressing it as a matter of departmental policy and public trust. A further incorrect approach would be to discuss the incident with other officers in a gossiping manner without taking any formal action. This constitutes a breach of professional conduct, as it spreads unverified information and can damage reputations without due process. It also fails to address the actual misconduct and instead fosters a negative and unprofessional work environment, further eroding trust within the department and potentially with the public if such discussions become known. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and ethical codes. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical conflict and the relevant departmental policies and legal obligations. 2. Evaluating potential courses of action against these established standards. 3. Selecting the action that best upholds the principles of integrity, accountability, and fairness, even if it is personally difficult. 4. Documenting all actions taken and adhering to established reporting procedures. Question 19. Examination of the data shows that during a lawful traffic stop in Buffalo, New York, a police officer observes in plain view a suspicious package partially concealed under the driver's seat. The officer has probable cause to believe this package contains illegal narcotics based on prior intelligence and the driver's nervous behavior. What is the most appropriate and legally sound course of action for the officer to take regarding the package? Option A. Conduct a full search of the vehicle and its occupants to locate any additional contraband, as the discovery of the package indicates further criminal activity. Option B. Immediately seize the package and its contents without further legal process, as it is partially visible and believed to be illegal narcotics. Option C. Allow the driver to depart with the package, as the initial stop was for a traffic violation and the package was not the primary reason for the stop. Option D. Secure the vehicle and its contents and seek a search warrant from a judge to examine the package and its contents. Correct answer is D. Secure the vehicle and its contents and seek a search warrant from a judge to examine the package and its contents. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge for a Buffalo Police Department officer regarding the proper handling of evidence discovered during a lawful traffic stop. The officer must balance the need to secure potential evidence related to a crime with the constitutional rights of the individual stopped. Misinterpreting or misapplying the legal standards for evidence seizure can lead to the suppression of crucial evidence, jeopardizing a prosecution, and potentially violating the individual's rights, leading to civil liability for the department. The officer's judgment is critical in determining the scope of the search and the admissibility of any discovered items. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the vehicle and its contents while awaiting a warrant or obtaining consent, especially when the evidence is not immediately apparent or in plain view. This approach respects the Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Specifically, if the officer has probable cause to believe the vehicle contains contraband or evidence of a crime, they can lawfully search the vehicle without a warrant under the automobile exception to the warrant requirement. However, if the discovery of the item is not immediately apparent as contraband or evidence, or if the scope of the search exceeds what is justified by probable cause, the officer must proceed cautiously. In this case, the officer has probable cause to believe the vehicle contains evidence of a crime. The most prudent and legally sound action is to secure the vehicle and its contents, and then seek a search warrant from a judge, or obtain voluntary consent from the driver to search. This ensures that any subsequent search is conducted within constitutionally permissible boundaries, maximizing the likelihood that any evidence obtained will be admissible in court. This aligns with the principles of due process and the protection against unlawful searches and seizures as enshrined in the U.S. Constitution and interpreted by New York state law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately seize the item without further legal justification, such as a warrant or consent, simply because it was found during a lawful stop. This action could be deemed an unlawful seizure if the item is not contraband in plain view, or if the scope of the search extends beyond what is permitted by the initial probable cause. This violates the Fourth Amendment by exceeding the lawful scope of the stop and search. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the item and allow the driver to leave with it, even with probable cause to believe it is evidence. This failure to secure potential evidence of a crime, when legally permissible to do so, undermines the department's duty to investigate and prosecute criminal activity. It could also be seen as a dereliction of duty if the item is clearly linked to a known offense. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a thorough search of the entire vehicle and its occupants without establishing probable cause for such an extensive search beyond the initial reason for the stop. This overreach would constitute an unlawful search and seizure, potentially leading to the suppression of all evidence found and civil action against the officer and department. Professional reasoning. When encountering potential evidence during a lawful stop, officers in Buffalo, New York, must apply the principles of the Fourth Amendment and relevant case law. Decision-making process should involve 1. Assessing whether probable cause exists to believe the vehicle contains evidence of a crime. 2. If probable cause exists, determining if the evidence is in plain view or if the automobile exception applies to justify a warrantless search. 3. If the situation is not clear-cut or involves potential evidence not immediately apparent, prioritizing the securing of the vehicle and seeking a search warrant or voluntary consent. 4. Documenting all actions and observations meticulously. This systematic approach ensures legal compliance, protects individual rights, and upholds the integrity of the investigative process. Question 20. Research into the Buffalo Police Department's collective bargaining agreement and New York state labor laws reveals that officers are entitled to overtime pay at a rate of 1.5 times their regular hourly rate for hours worked beyond their standard 8-hour shift. Officer Miller worked a total of 48 hours in a given week. His regular hourly rate is $25.00. If Officer Miller's standard work week is 40 hours, what is the total overtime pay he is entitled to for that week? Option A, $250.00. Option B, $400.00. Option C, $300.00. Option D, $200.00. The correct answer is C, $300.00. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Buffalo Police Department officer regarding the accurate calculation of overtime pay, which directly impacts departmental budget and officer compensation. Miscalculations can lead to financial discrepancies, potential grievances from officers, and scrutiny from departmental oversight or auditing bodies. Adherence to the specific collective bargaining agreement and New York state labor laws governing public sector overtime is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously reviewing the collective bargaining agreement's overtime provisions and cross-referencing them with the officer's documented duty hours. This approach ensures compliance with the agreed-upon terms for overtime calculation, which typically involves a specific hourly rate multiplier for hours worked beyond the standard shift, and adherence to New York State wage and hour laws. For instance, if the agreement specifies time and a half for overtime, the calculation would be overtime pay equals regular hourly rate, *1, 5 overtime hours worked. This method is correct because it directly applies the established contractual and legal framework, ensuring fairness and accuracy in compensation. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves simply multiplying the total hours worked by a standard hourly rate, ignoring the overtime multiplier stipulated in the collective bargaining agreement. This fails to comply with the contractual obligation to compensate officers at a higher rate for overtime, potentially leading to underpayment and a breach of contract. Another incorrect approach is to estimate the overtime hours based on general knowledge of patrol duties without precise documentation. This lacks the rigor required for accurate financial record keeping and can lead to significant errors, either overpaying or underpaying officers, and violates the principle of transparent and accountable financial management. A further incorrect approach is to apply a flat overtime rate that is not derived from the officer's base pay, as stipulated by the collective bargaining agreement. This disregards the established method of calculating overtime based on the regular hourly rate, which is a fundamental aspect of fair compensation under New York State labor law. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understand the relevant sections of the collective bargaining agreement pertaining to overtime pay and any applicable New York State labor laws. Second, meticulously document all hours worked, distinguishing between regular and overtime hours. Third, apply the correct formula for overtime calculation as per the agreement in state law. Finally, cross-check the calculated amount against departmental payroll records and be prepared to provide a clear breakdown of the calculation if questioned. This structured process minimizes errors and ensures compliance and fairness.